I used to believe life owed me something. It sounds naive now, but back then, it felt true. I had good grades, a decent degree, and a clear vision of what my life should look like by 25. But at 27, I was broke, unemployed, and sleeping on the worn-out couch in my childhood living room. Every morning, my father would pass by without saying much. Just a glance that said, "When will you get it together?" I didn't know, and honestly, I was starting to believe I never would. One night, scrolling endlessly on my cracked phone screen, I stumbled across a quote from the Holy Quran, that man can have nothing but what he strives for. Something about those words cut through the noise. It wasn't about what I deserved. It was about what I earned. Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism, which all says in the favor of struggle, effort, and strive. Do not be deceived. God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. Holy Bible. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Holy Bible. The soul of the sluggard craves and gets nothing, while the soul of the diligent is richly supplied. Judaism, Tanakh. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. Hinduism, Bhagavad Gita. You yourselves must strive. The Buddhas only point the way. Buddhism, Dhammapada. By one's own actions, nothing can be obtained. Nothing is in the hands of others. Sikhism Guru, Granth Sahib. I then decided to meet Mr. David, my uncle's friend. I once influenced by his spiritual come practical approach towards the messages given by religions. David wasn't flashy. He was one of those people you underestimate. At first, a quiet, middle-aged man who ran the local hardware store and never seemed in a rush. But my uncle knew him well, and one day, over coffee, we got introduced. I told him my situation. He listened without judgment, then asked, "What have you truly strived for in the past year?" Deliberately, consistently, without excuse. I had no answer. He smiled, slid a notepad toward me, and said, "Then let's start striving. Number 1, write your effort, not your goals." David told me something that flipped the way I looked at life. Most people are goal setters. Few are effort trackers. But the people who win, they focus on effort. He made it simple. Stop writing what you want and start writing what you do. I used to write down big goals, like get a job, be successful, get fit. But those words did nothing. They just reminded me of what I didn't have. David said, "That's future fantasy. What matters is what you strive for today, not tomorrow, today." So he gave me a challenge every single night before going to bed. I had to write down 3 things I did that day that required effort. Not outcomes, not dreams, just effort. At first, it was hard. I didn't feel like I was doing anything worth writing, but I still wrote. Walked 15 minutes, rewrote, resume bullet points. Watched one YouTube tutorial on interview questions. That was day 1. By day 5, I had a streak. It wasn't massive, but it was mine. Instead of feeling like a loser waiting for life to happen, I felt like a builder laying 1 brick a day. I stopped writing "get hired." Instead, I wrote, sent for cold emails, practiced answering behavioral questions, listened to a podcast about job search strategies. The shift was subtle but profound. My confidence didn't come from what I achieved. It came from seeing a pattern of effort. I had proof I was trying. David called it micro-proof of identity. When you record effort, you reinforce who you are becoming. Over time, I developed a rhythm. I began to measure my life not in terms of accomplishments, but in effort. Instead of waiting for the big wins, I started honoring the small, gritty attempts. A rejected application was no longer a failure, was an effort logged. A half-hour spent rewriting a cover letter wasn't just busy work, it was me striving. And the more I logged these actions, the more I started to see the invisible bridge I was building underneath my feet. Eventually, I began to crave that moment at night when I opened my notebook. It was no longer a chore. It became a small ceremony of self-respect. I wasn't lost anymore. I was learning to track my way out, one honest entry at a time. It's not about obsessing over the finish line. It's about tracking the steps. And that was the first time I felt the momentum shift from self-pity to self-respect. Number 2, make striving a ritual, not an emergency. David told me something that stuck with me. Most people wait for life to fall apart before they take themselves seriously. But the people who win, they make striving a part of their identity, not a panic button. He challenged me to build a system, not a resolution. A system of rituals. Discipline is just consistency with meaning, he said. And if you can't do it when life is normal, you won't magically do it when things collapse. So, together, we created what he called non-negotiables. 3 small, repeatable actions I had to do every single day, regardless of how I felt. 1. Apply to at least 2 jobs. 2. Read for 20 minutes. 3. Move my body, walk, stretch, whatever. At first, I underestimated them. They felt too simple to matter. But David insisted, it's not about intensity, it's about identity. Some days I breezed through the list. Other days, I was dragging my feet, especially after rejections. I remember one day getting an interview rejection email at 9 a.m. and still forcing myself to do a half-hour walk before lunch. I cried halfway through, but I did it. The magic wasn't in the size of the tasks. It was in their reliability. These actions became anchors when the tides of emotion pulled me down. They were proof that I still had control over something. With each day, I honored these small rituals. I noticed something powerful. My self-worth wasn't swinging up and down based on outcomes. I stopped living reactively and started living rhythmically. Even when things didn't go my way, I had 3 wins every single day. David explained, when effort becomes a ritual, you stop seeing your struggle as chaos and start seeing it as choreography. And he was right. I wasn't panicking anymore. I was practicing, and that made all the difference. Number 3, measure progress backward. One rainy Tuesday, I was feeling defeated again. I'd gotten ghosted after a final round interview. I told David, what's the point? I'm trying, but nothing's changing. He didn't argue. He just asked, what did you write a month ago? I pulled out my notebook and flipped back to an entry from 4 weeks earlier. It read, woke up at 11:30, couldn't get out of bed, watched Netflix all day, no job apps. Then I looked at my entry from that day, woke up at 6:45, sent 3 job applications, finished reading a chapter from Atomic Habits, jogged 2 miles. David pointed at both entries and said, "You still think nothing's changing?" That hit me like a ton of bricks. I had made progress. I just hadn't seen it because I was only looking forward, not back. David explained it this way: measuring forward keeps you chasing. Measuring backward keeps you grateful. He told me about a Canadian startup founder who kept a progress jar. Every day, he wrote one small win and dropped it in the jar. After 6 months, he opened all the notes and cried. The transformation was undeniable. But without those slips of paper, it would have gone unnoticed. I decided to start something similar, digital effort tracker, in my notes app. Every week, I'd write down the week's best effort moment. Over time, it became a mosaic of growth. Even weeks where I didn't land interviews or hear back from companies, I could see that I was leveling up. Waking earlier, writing better cover letters, asking sharper questions, learning to show up even when it hurt. Built one step at a time. It taught me patience, but more importantly, gave me proof. Proof that I wasn't stuck. I was evolving, and that perspective changed everything. Number 4, share your struggle publicly. One day, David said something I didn't expect. Now that you're building momentum, it's time to make it public. I raised an eyebrow. Public. Why? Because when your struggle lives only in your head, it becomes a prison. But when you speak it, you give others permission to be honest too. At first, I resisted. I was afraid of judgment. What would people think if I admitted how lost I'd been? But David reminded me that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was leadership. He told me a story about a young woman in Manchester who started an anonymous blog to document her journey out of depression through tiny acts of discipline. She didn't give advice. She just told the truth, what she tried, what failed, what helped. Within a year, her blog had thousands of readers. Not because she was perfect, but because she was real. David said, "Struggle shared becomes a bridge." Someone out there needs to know they're not the only one trying. So I took the leap. I made a simple post on LinkedIn. 3 months ago, I was sleeping on my parents' couch and struggling to get out of bed. I decided to track one effort every day, no matter how small. Today, I applied to my 75th job and ran my first 5K. Still no offer yet, but I'm still showing up. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. Comments poured in. People thanked me for being honest. Some even messaged privately saying they were inspired to start their own effort logs. That moment taught me that our stories aren't just for us. They're for the people who are silently losing hope. Since then, I've continued to share parts of my journey, not as a hero, but as a fellow striver. I don't need to be impressive. I just need to be honest. And every time I share, I feel a little lighter and a little stronger. Because when you tell the truth about your journey, you stop hiding and start helping. And in the process, you discover something incredible. That your greatest source of shame can become your greatest source of strength. Especially when you give it away to light someone else's path. Number 5. Turn rejection into refinement. Rejection used to feel like a punch to the gut. I'd pour my heart into an application, get my hopes up after a promising interview, and then nothing. Or worse, a cold, templated email that started with, "We regret to inform you." Each one chipped away at me. I started to equate rejection with failure, proof that I wasn't good enough. But David saw it differently. "You're mistaking feedback for finality," he said. "Rejection isn't the end, it's information." He encouraged me to treat each no like a gift, something I could unpack, examine, and learn from. The difference between amateurs and pros, he told me, is how they handle rejection. Amateurs personalize it, pros process it. So, we created a rejection ritual. Every time I got a no, whether it was a job, a pitch, or a cold email, had to do 3 things. 1. Write down what I think went wrong. 2. Ask for feedback if possible. 3. Make one refinement for the next attempt. At first, it felt like pouring salt on a wound. But slowly, I began to see patterns. One company mentioned I wasn't specific enough about results in my resume. I rewrote my bullet points to be measurable. Another said I didn't seem confident in my final interview. I started practicing mock interviews with friends and even recorded myself to analyze body language. Each rejection became a rep in the gym. I was getting stronger, sharper, and more resilient. David reminded me, "You don't become unworthy when someone says no. You become unshakable when you refine your next yes." One night, after my 8th rejection in a month, I sat down and looked through all the notes I'd made. I realized my resume had been overhauled. My LinkedIn profile was now sharp, and I'd improved how I presented myself by miles. None of that would have happened without the rejections pushing me to grow. Rejection hadn't destroyed me. It had refined me, and eventually the yes came. But by then, I was no longer desperate for it. I had already become someone who could earn it. 6 months later, I was promoted, not because I was the smartest, but because I brought solutions, showed up early, and asked better questions. I wasn't striving to impress anymore. I was striving to improve. My father hugged me last Christmas and said, "You've changed." And I had, but not because life got easier, because I got stronger. Key takeaways for you, the reader. 1. Track effort, not outcomes. What did you do today that moved you forward? 2. Make striving daily. Ritual beats random effort. 3. Look back to see progress. The mirror of time reflects growth. 4. Speak your truth. Struggle shared is strength multiplied. 5. Use rejection. Let it refine, not define. If you're sitting in your own version of a struggle right now, hear this. You are not powerless. You are not broken. You simply haven't started striving yet. And the moment you do, life begins to open, not because it owes you, but because you finally earned the key. Because the truth is, a man has nothing but what he strives for, and that's enough to build everything.